Okay, this is your review video for your upcoming quiz and test that you have this week. This review video should be the very first thing that you watch for the week because it will both prepare you for the quiz, which is obviously shorter, and questions, and then the test as well. All right, so everything on this PowerPoint might not necessarily be on your quiz, but it will be on your test. Since the test has more questions. Okay, so the first thing we need to start with, and I'm going to be I am going to be harder on you as far as the work that you show. The first test, we're really just trying to, figure things out, and there were some modifications that some students needed to make to their work. And it was, as lenient as I could, try to work with you guys, but now you know what I expect. And so I need you to follow these guidelines. We need to keep the integrity of our quizzes and tests as much as we possibly can. And this comes down to, sometimes just a matter of honesty and a matter of your character and just following these instructions. And ultimately, you are the one who benefits from this because you are learning very important concepts that will be in Algebra 1 next year. So it's very important that we try as best as we can. All right, so for the quiz and the test, you shouldn't have any notes, books, nothing in front of you, okay? You should not be receiving help from anybody. I need this to be your work and your work alone. On the homeworks, I'm totally fine, and I fully support help from parents or even classmates working together. As long as you're not just sharing answers, if you're collaborating, I think that that's great. That's what we do in class here, okay? But when it comes to the quiz and the test, it's your work and your work alone, okay? You don't need a calculator on the quiz and the test. As you've seen in these lessons with product of powers and quotient of powers, a lot of it is addition and subtraction. There might be a few problems on your test that you have to do some multiplication by hand, but that is nothing outside of your range of abilities, okay? You do not need them. I'm testing you over exponents. Calculators can very easily calculate exponents, and then you really have not done any work at all for yourself. On the test, you must use scratch paper. You must number each question. You must write the original problem, show your work, and box your answer just like you would do on a test in my classroom. You guys know what our tests have looked like this year. I need your work to look just like what it would look like if we were in the classroom. And I'm going to be very clear in this video of what I want you to show in your work. You have to send me a picture of your work on Remind. If Remind is blocking you from texting, most of the time that's due to an age limit, you can email it to me. It's absolutely fine. Okay, last but not least, I will not give you a grade. And when I mean I won't give you a grade, I will put in a 0 or an ABS for absent for your test if you do not submit your work. That means I don't hear from you. I've reached out to you. I've said, hey, where's your work? And you don't turn it in to me. That doesn't mean the 0 is going to stay, but that means that I'm not giving you a grade until I receive your work. If there's an issue with your work, if you were supposed to show work on 10 or 15 problems and you turn in work that's 2 or 3 problems, that's not acceptable, okay? And so at that point, if I have to reassign your test, if I have to give you an alternate test, you will receive a deduction off of your grade, and that will become your new starting grade. Right now, remember, all of this has to do with you submitting your work. So as long as you take the test and you write down your work the way I asked you to do it, then there's no issues at all. You earn the grade that you scored, and all is good. Okay, so I just have to make it very clear. I do not want to have to track down a lot of students asking for work. As soon as you submit your test, snap a picture and send it to me. That's all you have to do. All right, and you'll be good. Okay, so what can you expect? All right, so this test is only over 3 sections, so it's really focused on those terms and definitions that you learned in the first 3 sections. Product of powers, power of powers, quotient of powers properties. Okay, so just make sure you're familiar with each one of them. And we'll talk more about them later on in the review video. To evaluate means to solve. I need you to pay very close attention to the directions on your test. And I've matched the directions here in this PowerPoint to the directions that you'll see on your test. To simplify means that there's not necessarily an answer. You combine the terms where you can, you use your properties, okay, but there's not going to be a specific answer. All right, so what types of problems can you expect to see on your test, okay? Well, write the repeated multiplication as an exponent. So on your test scratch work, I want you to write the original problem and the answer, almost just like a homework problem here, right? Well, Ms. Kinder is really not a whole lot of work to show, right? So if this was number 1 on your test, you would simply copy this to your scratch work, and then because it repeats 5 times, you would say -4 to the 5th power. All right, so don't stress about problems that you're like, okay, she's, really like got me, focused on I've got to show my work. Well, sometimes, and I understand that, there is no work to show. This would be an example of that. All right, say this is number 2. Just simply write the original problem in your work and then write the product using exponents. Now, be careful on this. Don't put the dot or the X because, and I go back in your test also and I check, but Big Ideas would reject that as a correct answer. You need to write it all together without symbols in between because this shows multiplication. All right. Okay, next up, evaluating expressions. Okay, so on this homework, we practiced using repeated multiplication, and I expect to see that in your scratch work, and then you can answer the problem. So here's what I'm looking for on these problems. And also, more specifically, I didn't just randomly pick these problems. I looked at your test questions, and I chose these problems because they're similar to your test. Okay, so I want you to actually go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to try to do your repeated multiplication. All right, maybe just do the first one. Do your repeated multiplication, and then evaluate means do the 12 times 12 times 12. So this would be one of the very few problems where you may have to show some work, okay? So the repeated multiplication should be 12 times 12 times 12. I'm going to look for this in your test work. So Ms. Kinder, what if I don't have it? I'm going to take off a point, okay? It's not going to be 20 points, but you're going to lose points for not showing the work the way that I ask you to show it, okay? So 12 repeated 3 times. And then you say, well, I know what 12 times 12 is, right? It's 144. Well, you might need to just do a quick multiplication by hand. 882, 441. To get your 12 to the 3rd power, 1728. Okay, and then you would write this, of course, in your answer on your test. All right, repeated multiplication here. This one's important, and I'm going to be looking to your work to make sure that you knew how to write it. The negative is not a part of the base. So that means the negative is out here, and then I do my repeated multiplication 4 times inside my parentheses. And again, this is something that you should have practiced already as well. So now I need to do this multiplication, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Now this is one that we have seen probably at some point. So if you have it memorized, that's okay. All right, you don't necessarily have to show your work on this part, okay, to actually multiply your 3's. But I have to see on your scratch work the repeated multiplication. Then 3 times itself 4 times is -1/81, , or 1 negative 1 over 81. Okay, this is probably the correct answer right there. All right, okay, last but not least, order of operations. You have 1 or 2 problems like this on your test. So you just have to make sure that you follow order of operations. PEMDAS, PE, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction. So exponents come first. This is not 6, right? It's 8. So 15 plus 4, because I do my division next, would give me 19. So you have a couple like that on your quiz and your test. Okay, so now we get into product of powers and power of powers and quotient of powers. All right, so again, I'm trying to give you really specific information of what I want to see on your test scratch work. We're going to treat these like homework problems again. Okay, much of this is just simple math and just knowing whether to add or subtract your exponents. You have to first check and make sure you have same base. Product of powers says you can do what to the exponents? You can add them, right? You can add exponents with the same base. So this would be negative 3 over 7, and 3 plus 9 is to the 12th power. This is what you would show me on your scratch work. Okay, so go ahead and try to do this one. When there's nothing there, remember there's an understood 1. That's about the only thing that can mess you up here. X to the 9th power. All right, okay, so that's what I'm looking for on your scratch work. Power of powers. So the way this is different from product of powers is now I only see one base. One base raised to a power, raised to another power. With power of powers, I multiply my exponents. And again, you only have to write the original problem and then box your answer. B to the 30th power. All right, now on this next one, I think you have 2 or 3 problems like this. Okay, so this one is, if there's one of the 2 that could trip you up, it's definitely this one, okay? So when you have more than one term, this is negative 2 times x. You must raise each term inside the parentheses to that power. So it's negative 2 to the 7th power times x to the 7th power. Well, I can actually do this multiplication, okay? Now, this is probably going to be as extensive as you're going to see it, and I actually did choose this exponent for a reason. You could see a negative 2 to the 5th power, 6, maybe 7th power, okay? So I would go as high as you can, maybe using that mental math. 2 to the 4th power, that's 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, times 2 is 16. 16 times 2 is 32, so I'm all the way to 2 to the 5th power. So 32 times 2 would give me 2 to the 6th power. And then I just multiply that one more time to give me 2 to the 7th power, 128. So this is your final answer. You must evaluate any exponent you can, okay? And it will, it'll be clear on that, okay? On your test, 128 x to the 7th. All right, okay, quotient of powers. All right, so again, simplify the fractions, use your properties where you can. So these are multi-step types of problems. So what I want you to do, you don't necessarily have to show me this subtraction, but I want you to simplify the fraction on your test work, okay? So g to the 8th power over g to the 7th power, my quotient of powers property says, when I'm dividing exponents with the same base, I can subtract my exponents. So this becomes g to the first power times, what does this simplify to? G to the third power. All right, so then my answer is g to the fourth power. This would be the work that I'm looking for on the ones where I have to do both properties, both the quotient and the product of powers properties. All right. Okay, I want you to try this next one. Just pause it real quick and try to work this next one. All right, so that first fraction reduces to c to the second power times, this becomes c to the 12th power over c to the 9th power, which is c to the third power. So my answer is c to the 5th power. All right, write your answer as a power. Okay, all right, so now we're to the application problems. Again, I modeled these after questions that you would see on your test. Probably not going to see this on a quiz. It's more so for your test. So now they want you to come up with an expression. We've done a ton of practice problems where we used power of powers, right? Okay, now you're going to make up your own. So this is like it's going to give you that explanation box where you can write in one of your own. So for x to the 15th power, there's really only probably one that we could do. We could say x to the third power, and what power could we raise that to that would make our answer x to the 15th power? All right, hopefully you're thinking to raise it to the 5th power. Okay, so this is your answer. So when I check this for your test, this is what I'm looking for. All right, is the actual problem. I know what the answer is supposed to be. I want to know what your problem is. Okay, so let's look at this next one. Write an expression that simplifies to, so here's your answer, x to the 7th power, using the quotient of powers property. So don't do product of powers. That could definitely mess it up. All right, quotient of powers property. I'm just going to give you the numerator. All right, what if I said x to the 10th power? What would I have to divide that by to make it my answer x to the 7th power? Hopefully you're thinking the 3rd power. Now this is definitely an example of, is there more than one combination of values that can subtract to be 7? Absolutely, right? You could do 9 minus 2. You could do 11 minus 4, okay? So as long as it's quotient of powers, we'll be fine. What expression would be equivalent to this expression? All right, so in here I've put in some common mistakes. All right, I want you to look at these 4 options and start off with the ones that you know that it's not. Okay, there's no way it's going to be this. Okay, well, the first one that jumps out at me is not going to be 4 to the 5th, because I know when I have common base, I don't multiply those together. So this is probably, to me, the most obvious one that would be out. With product of powers, okay, so these are being multiplied together because there's no symbol in between. I know this means multiplication. All right. It also means I don't multiply my exponents to make 2 to the 6th power. I'm supposed to add them. Okay, so now that you have 2 options to figure out which one this is closest to, you could add your exponents, right? And you could say 2 to the 5th power, and then just evaluate that. Or you could evaluate these individually. What is 2 to the 3rd power? 2 times 2 times 2, it's 8, right? What is 2 to the 2nd power? It's 4, right? Either way, your answer is the same. 2 to the 5th power, if you actually remember back to one of the problems we just worked. 2 to the 5th power was 32, and 8 times 4 is 32. So either way, you can prove that your answer is 32. All right. So you're going to have one similar to that on your test where it says, what's the equivalent expression? And that's how you would solve it. All right, last but not least, we have a review question. I only put one on this test. It's just kind of how it ended up working out, and that's okay with me. Your one review question is just like this. I want the equation that is represented by this graph. All right, so if you remember back to chapter 13, you need 2 things to write an equation. You need what? Slope and y-intercept. So for your slope on a graph, you can count rise over run. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that positive or negative? Negative, right? Over 1, 2, 3. So there we have our slope. We must write our equations. Y equals mx plus b. So y equals, slope is my m, negative 4/3, x, and do you guys remember how to find your b? All right, and it's where the line crosses the y-axis. Here I was just a little off. I should have adjusted this line a little bit. It'll cross right on the line on your test, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's basically 0. So you don't need the plus 0. When it's 0, you can just leave it off. So this would be your answer. Negative 4/3 x. All right, so if you understand everything we've gone through, and we talked about how we're going to show our work, you should be good to go. You should be good for your quiz and your test.